You're listening to Let's Talk About Fatherlessness with host Sean Teis, where we talk about leading fatherless families to the Heavenly Father.
Hey, my name's Sean Teis, host of Let's Talk About Fatherlessness. I'm excited about our guest today. We have Dr. Gary Chapman with us today. So exciting to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Sean. It's great to be with you.
Would you take a few minutes and I mean, everybody probably knows who you are, but would you just take a few minutes and tell us about your ministry and tell us about yourself?
Sure. I live in North Carolina. You can probably pick that up by my voice, And I have worked on the same church staff for 50 years. I officially retired about a year and a half ago, but they let me keep my office. They let me keep my assistant. So I'm still here every day. One of my major roles through the years has been helping marriage and family. For 10 years, I directed our college ministry in the early years in the 70s, and just absolutely incredible ministry there. And then worked with single adults and directed adult education, but counseling has always been a major part of my ministry. So helping people, where they are, take steps in the right direction. That's kind of been my journey.
That's wonderful. And we've all heard of your books, The 5 Love Languages. Would you just share about those for a few minutes?
Yeah, that book has amazed me, how God has used it. I discovered it in my counseling, that what makes one person feel loved doesn't make another person feel loved. And so, a couple would say, a guy would say, I do this and this and this and this, and she tells me she doesn't feel loved. I don't understand that. And I realized that he was sincere, he was loving her, but it wasn't registering with her emotionally. And I think almost everyone agrees that one of our deepest emotional needs is the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. And so I discovered that basically there's 5 fundamental, what I call love languages, 5 ways to express love. And each of us has a primary love language. And if you don't speak our primary language, we won't feel loved, even though you're speaking some of the other languages. And just briefly, they are words of affirmation. For some people, this really makes them feel loved when you affirm them verbally. Others, it's acts of service. It's doing things for them. In a marriage, it would be like washing dishes, vacuuming floors, cooking meals, washing the car, walking the dog, changing the baby's diaper. And for these people, actions speak louder than words. You can say, I love you, I love you, I love you. If you don't have some actions showing your love by serving them, they won't feel love. And then there's gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. The gift says, they were thinking about me. Look what they got from me. And the gift doesn't have to be expensive. We've always said it's the thought that counts. They were thinking about me. They bought this from me. Isn't that neat? And then quality time. Giving the other person your undivided attention. I do not mean a couple sitting on the couch watching TV together. Someone else has your attention. I'm talking about the TV's off, the computer's down. We're not answering our phone. We're listening to each other. We're sharing things in our life with each other. We're getting to know each other. And I believe just like we ought to have a daily time with God in which we sit down and listen to God by reading his word, that we really ought to have a daily sit down and listen time with our spouse. And for some people, this is what makes them feel loved. And then there's physical touch. And we've long known the emotional power of physical touch. That's why we pick up babies. We hold them, kiss them, and cuddle them. As long as that baby is held, they begin to feel loved before they even know what the word means. So the love language develops pretty early in life. I've said basically about by 4 years of age, you can tell a child's love language by the way they relate to you. My son's love language, for example, is physical touch. When he was that age, when I came home, he'd run to the door and grab my legs and climb on me. He's touching me because he wants to be touched. My daughter never did that. At that age, she would say, Daddy, come into my room. I want to show you something. Her language was quality time. She wanted the two of us to be doing something together. And as she got to be a teenager, she would say, Dad, can we take a walk after dinner? She's asking me for quality time. So yeah, out of those 5, children have a primary love language. Adults have a primary love language. I do say to parents, don't hear me saying you only speak the child's primary language. You give heavy doses of the primary. You sprinkle in the other 4 because we would like that child to learn how to receive love and give love in all 5 languages. That's the healthiest adult. Not many of us received all 5 growing up.
Yeah.
So we came to adulthood and we didn't know how to speak some of these languages. But the good news is you can learn to speak them, even if you didn't receive them as a child.
Yeah, that's so good. And you've written several books. Are there any resources you have that could specifically help the fatherless or single moms? Do you have anything that you could recommend?
Yeah, Dr. Clarence Schuler and I, he's African American, and we've been really close friends for more than 50 years now. I met him when he was 14 years old.
Yeah.
And so we wrote a book for young men called Choose Greatness, 11 Wise Decisions That Brave Young Men Make. And we encourage him, if he has a father in the home, to read it with his father. Yeah, he reads the chapter, the father reads the chapter, and then they discuss the answers at the end of the chapters. But if they don't have a father in the home, we ask, talk with your mother or your grandmother and see if they can recommend an older man, a trusted man that would be willing to sit down and read this with you. You read it, he reads it, and you talk about your answers together. It is a way for fathers who are, trying maybe to mentor children that are not their biological children. It's a tool for them to use to really discuss key issues for that young man's life. And we really believe if a young man can learn to speak, learn to choose these decisions, make these 11 decisions, it's going to really, really help him have a successful life.
That's really good. And is there anything for the single mom, just for her personal life? Do you have any resources like the love languages or?
Yeah, I think the love languages of children, it's the title, the 5 love languages of children, will help a single parent understand that it's not that I have to learn. If they have 2 children, they're probably going to have different love languages.
Yeah.
And so you got to find out what that love language is and learn to speak their primary love language, as well as I said, speaking the others. So that would be a helpful book. I think another book for single moms would be the singles edition of the 5 love languages. It's just called the 5 love languages for singles. And this applies the concept to all of their relationships, their parents, their siblings, their children. And so I think both of those books will be helpful to a single mom.
Okay. And that's great. And thank you so much for telling us about your resources. And we are so thankful for your ministry, all the work you've done. And I know it has not been probably an easy road, all the books you've published and the things you've done. So thank you so much for your hard work. Now shifting gears here, we're here to talk about fatherlessness. And you have years of experience of being a pastor, of writing books, of probably counseling, different things like that. Could you take some time right now just to share your firsthand experience of anything that comes to your mind about fatherlessness, whatever comes to your mind first?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is an appreciation for my father. Mm-hmm. When I have seen so much, with children growing up without fathers. And I would suggest any man that wants to help other young men, look back on your own life and ask, what do I learn from my father? And I would never have known how to plant a garden if it hadn't been for my father. How to plant potatoes and then dig them up without ruining them. And there's a lot of practical stuff, how to ride a bicycle, how to drive a car, and then you come to appreciate, if you had a father, you come to appreciate the father. And then you can look around you and everybody, you don't have to look very far to see young men who don't have a father in the home. And my experience has been through the years that those children have a hard time because they don't have a model of what a man should be and look like. And consequently, and many of them don't feel loved. Sometimes the mother is working, 2 jobs and really doesn't have a whole lot of time with them. And so they're spending their time, a lot of time, just free time. And they turn outside the home to try to find love. They wouldn't be saying, I'm trying to find love, but that's really what they're doing. But consequently, they often get attracted to people on the street who are not healthy for them, and they get pulled into trying drugs, just try, and they get into the drug culture. And really their whole life is ruined, until there can be redemption. Somebody reaches in and seeks to help them. So I just think growing up without a father is a tremendous handicap to those young men. And those of us who have healthy relationships with our fathers, I think have the potential of reaching out to help those young men. I mentioned Clarence Schuler. As I said, I met him when he was 14. And he had a father in the home until his father died. His father died when he was 16. And so not only was I working with him and mentoring him and he led him to Christ, but I kind of became a substitute father for him, in those years, and walked with him through high school, through college, through seminary, through his marriage. I was in his wedding, and it developed. It started off as a mentoring relationship. It ended up as a long-term friendship, which we enriched each other's lives. John said, the Apostle John said, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth." And so when you lead a young man to Christ and then spend time with him and help him walk through the journey of life into adulthood, man, there's tremendous joy in that. And every Christian father has the potential of finding a young man that doesn't have a father in the home that he can reach out to. And get him involved in something at your church if you have something like that for them, or some other organization, but get them involved in that, where they come to trust you first of all, and then they come to trust Jesus. And now, you can mentor them and help them grow in their relationship. So there's all kind of opportunities there, but the need is absolutely tremendous in our culture for adult Christian men to have a positive influence on these young men who don't have a father in the home.
That's wonderful. And I've heard your story. I know Clarence, and he's a great man, and I'm so thankful for what you did with him. Could you just spend a little more time on that for the people that are listening, for the youth pastor that's listening? Just some of the practical things that you did with Clarence when he was 16. His dad passed away, and I know you went to different events and things like that. But could you tell a little more what you did for him, how you impacted his life?
Yeah, well, our relationship started back in the late 60s when school integration was just taking place. And one of our I was a youth director in a church, not the church I've served in for 50 years, but another church. And one night, he and his buddy showed up. They had been invited to our youth meeting on Tuesday night. We'd built a new gymnasium, and one of our students had invited him and his buddy to come. And they walked in, two black young couples, and young men, and 100 white kids. And in those years, that didn't happen. They were brave to even come, and he talks about that. But we met them that night, and after it was over, I said, "Hey guys, we're here every Tuesday night. You guys are always welcome." And so they started coming, and I would see them every week. And sometimes I'd go by and pick them up, and sometimes somebody else would go by and pick them up. Sometimes they'd walk and come. They were faithful. And about 2 years after that, maybe a little less, we had a weekend retreat, and they went with us on the retreat. And on that retreat, Clarence accepted Christ.
Wow.
And when that happened, I said, "Clarence, let's just spend some time together, man. I'm so excited for you." And so I invited him to come over to my house every Saturday morning, and we would work through a discipleship program. The Navigators put out, they have a little discipleship program, and we just kind of worked our way through that discipleship program. Started memorizing scriptures together, and just sharing life together and praying together about whatever was going on in each of our lives. He started praying for me, I started praying for him. And since he was coming to our house, our children got to know him. They were just young children, but they got to know him. And every night when they prayed, they prayed for Clarence too. So, and then when his father died, I got to know his mother and his sister, and kind of became a part of the family. I mean, they already knew about me, but they hadn't really met me. And but I think it's that kind of thing, just an organized way of kind of taking them through some discipleship material, which is what we did. And then, of course, he came time to go to college, and he wasn't sure. He was sensing that God was leading him in his ministry by this time, some kind of ministry. So he ended up going to Moody Bible Institute, where I had gone. And I think he was, influenced by the fact that I had gone there, and he saw me and he thought, well, maybe I ought to go there. So he did. And he played basketball. He was the first black student on the basketball team at Moody in Chicago back in those years. But in his senior year, he flunked out because he forgot his exams, and he missed and he flunked out. And he didn't call me, but one of his buddies called me and told me what had happened. So I called back up there because he was staying with his buddy. I said, "Tell Clarence I'd like to talk with him." And he talked to Clarence. He said, he didn't want to talk to you. And I said, well, you tell Clarence if he doesn't talk to me on the phone tomorrow morning, I'll get on a plane and I'll be up there because I want to talk to him. So I guess he decided he'd rather talk on the phone than not come up there. So he got on the phone and he said his first words were, "I'm sorry." I said, "Well, Clarence, I am disappointed." I said, "Yeah, certainly I'm disappointed, but it's not the end of the world. You know, God still has plans for you, and it's not the end of the world." I said, there are things we can do. I said, if you want to, you can come home, you know, and I'll help you find a job and you can work a while and then we'll decide what the next step is. Or if God opens up an opportunity for you up there to work, you know, you can do that. And then we'll just pray what the next step is. So there was a youth organization there in Chicago that asked him to be a part of that youth ministry. And so he worked there for a year and had a tremendous influence on young men in Chicago. Working at that youth center, just spending his life there, really investing in them. And then he applied to another college and was accepted and went and completed and got his degree.
Wow.
And then he went to seminary, and he went to the same seminary I went to, Southwestern Baptist Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. There he met his wife. And I was in their wedding. I was the best man in their wedding.
That's good.
And he had a wonderful wife. And now they have three grown daughters. And they call me Grandpa. And my two children call him their brother. You know, it's just when you spend time through the years, it's a friendship that really is more like family, you know, than anything else. And so that was our experience. And I think, you know, if a father, as a Christian father, only took one young man through that kind of process,
yes,
it would be one of the best investments of his time that he could ever do.
Yeah, I was sitting here talking to you because I had people that did that for me. They invested in my life. I had a youth pastor, and then it was different seasons of people that I went through high school with. I had a youth leader and another youth leader. Then the guy became my boss. And he, even to this day, I was talking to him yesterday. He's on our board for our ministry. He's like a dad to me. And when you said it's like family, it's so true, because when I go back into town or you just even staying connected with them, you know, we're like family. His daughter's like my little sister. It's a family thing, and it's hard to describe. Like when I went to college, I just started telling people that he was my dad because I was tired of explaining the whole thing. I said, "Yeah, my dad's in Pennsylvania." You know, but like, "You grew up fatherless." I'm like, "Well, it's a fill-in dad kind of thing. It's a mentor," but it was just easier to explain than that. But that's wonderful what you did with Clarence, and I'm sure we'll have Clarence on a future episode, and we'll get him to share his side of it. But shifting gears a little bit more, let's go over to where, you know, with being a pastor and ministry leader, what are some trends that you've seen with the issue of fatherlessness over the years in our culture, in our country?
Well, I think, unfortunately, there are many churches that just aren't addressing the issue at all. You know, they just don't really, I guess, see the need. I don't know what the deal is. But where the churches have seen the need, and it's a greater need in certain geographical locations than other geographical locations, I understand that. But when you do understand the need, then I think those churches that have geared their children's program and their youth program to include those kind of children, it's been tremendously effective. Because when those children see, and whether it's young men or young women for that matter, but when they come to see that this church is interested in us and they want us to be there and they have things for us to do on a regular basis, you know, every week there's something going on there that we're involved in, they have a tremendous impact on those young men and young women for that matter. So I just think it's a matter of having a vision for that and being open to that. And especially across cultural lines, because sometimes, you know, these young men don't look like, if you're in a church that's basically a white church, you know, they don't look like you, but they'll respond. I mean, they're people, they're humans, they're made in God's image. We're all humans, and when you reach out across cultural lines, it's a wonderful opportunity to not only help them grow as a person and become a successful adult, but it's also helping you understand their culture and them understand your culture. That was a real positive thing for me and for Clarence. Just understanding each other's culture, helping each other understand what's going on in the world around us. So it is a tremendous ministry for a church to get involved in. So I think every church that does that, and their lay people get a vision for it, it becomes one of their major ministries.
Yeah, and I think so too. I agree completely with you. I think that every church should focus on that. Now, what about those churches that are hesitant, that they don't want to be involved in that? I've had churches tell me, we've been doing this for almost 15 years now, and I've had churches tell me that's not a focus of ours. That's not something that we focus on right now. What would you say to them?
Well, I don't know what I would say, to be honest with you. I think I would ask them why.
Yeah.
Why do they not see this as a needed ministry? And some of it is that their vision has just been limited. They're not into what's going on the other side of town or somewhere a little distant from their geographical location. And for pastors, I understand that they're involved, with the people in their church and the sickness and the death and the weddings and the funerals. And I mean, pastoring is a hard job, and it can consume your time. And to think about doing something new and different, I think some pastors just I don't have time,
Yeah.
And this is where I think we need to, as pastors, help our people get the vision of using their talents and their abilities to minister. It's not just coming to church and being involved in church. It's reaching out to our community, seeing what the needs are. And many times lay people can start a ministry like this, and the pastor doesn't have to be involved all that much, except just encouraging them, and whatever, if they have questions, that kind of thing. But I think lay people, they want to do that. Most Christians who are really walking with God want to have a positive impact on the world. And here's one way you can have a positive impact on the world. It's just working with these children who grew up in fatherless homes. And so if a lay person gets the vision, it can become a really strong ministry growing out of your church. So I think that's what I would encourage pastors to do, is to, first of all, look around and see what the need is in your community. And then think in terms of someone in your church. You think, I think they would be good at that. I think they could begin to start something like that, and kind of share the vision with them and reach out. And if nobody in their city is doing anything, find a church somewhere that is, and send this lay person to that church so they can kind of talk with their leadership. How did y'all start this? How does this work? What do you do? I mean, there's a lot of help out there. Organizations like yours and others that will help you, that will help them begin a ministry like this in their church.
That's great. Yeah, and definitely it's not to be a slight on pastors, because they are incredible and they're working so hard, and they're doing their best a lot of times. And so just to encourage pastors, I love what you said, just to get some lay people involved and not being scared of fatherless ministry, because it can be a scary thing. It can be a daunting task to try to take on the fatherless in your church, in your community, but just taking time to say, hey, we're going to try to explore this and see who we have, how we can get involved, and maybe just doing an analysis on it, saying who's in our church, who's in our community that we can help, who can be involved in the ministry, how can we get these people plugged in together. And the thing is, it's an epidemic and it continues to grow. And so we as a church got to be part of this and doing our part to help the fatherless. And I like what you said earlier, if you help one family, one kid as a family, that's an amazing thing that you can do. And look what you did with Clarence's life. It's an incredible thing. Now, looking at fatherlessness a little more, what about the grown up that grew up fatherless, that they're now a husband or a wife, they're a mom or a dad, using your resources that you have, the love languages or any other resources you have, what would you say to them on how to kind of remove the toxic part of that from their life as a grown up now, saying, I'm going to overcome this, what would you give as advice or encouragement to just get past that? Because a lot of people, they can't, like even my own dad, he couldn't get past, well, my dad died when I was 13. And so he couldn't get past that, became an alcoholic, and it made me fatherless then, because he just couldn't get past his own struggles. What would you say to somebody like that, or just somebody that's becoming a mom or a dad or a husband or a wife, and to help them overcome that past so that they can have a successful future?
Well, the first thing I would do, I would be empathetic with them, by which I mean I would emotionally, I would identify with them and say, I can understand how you'd feel that way. We're all influenced by the home in which we grew up in. And if we grew up without a father, we were influenced by that. But here's the good news. We are not controlled. Our adult life is not controlled by what happened to us as a child, or what didn't happen to us as a child. As adults, we can make decisions to move in a different direction. And when we do, as a Christian, we have God's help, because God wants to make us healthy. He wants to make us a godly, if we have children, a godly father to those children, and a godly husband to this wife. And so here's when I give marriage conferences around the country, which I do all the time on Saturdays, here's what I challenge them to at the end of the conference. For the rest of your life, if you're married, you and your wife share a book on marriage every year. And here's what I mean by share a book. You choose a book, a Christian book on marriage, and each of you read the same chapter that week. At the end of the week, you sit down and say, what can we learn from that chapter? And you just work your way through a book. And you do a book every year the rest of your life. And then every year the rest of your life, you go to something on marriage. It can be a class in your church that's offered. It can be a one-day conference like I do on Saturdays. It can be a weekend conference like Family Life does with these weekend conferences. But you go to something every year on marriage. And so you do those two things, you're going to be growing, because change doesn't take place just all at once. I'm going to be a holy man, and a great father and a great husband. No, we learn as we go. And but those are two ways to continue to stimulate growth, in your marriage and in your role as a father. So otherwise, we just kind of get impressed by what we see on TV or what we happen to read in the newspaper. And those things aren't going to help you very much, So just expose yourself on a regular basis to those kind of things. And if you have a couples class in your church that meets on a regular basis, then attend a class like that, where you got other people that are encouraging. You're all encouraging each other. That's the way we grow from where we were to where we want to be.
That's great. And now looking at that from a youth perspective, if you were, say today somebody came to your church, and maybe a single mom brought her child into your church and said, hey, would you just talk to my kid for 5 minutes? What would you say to them? What would, just to kind of, this is the only chance you have to speak to them. What would you say to them to help them grow up and serve God and overcome this obstacle?
I think the first thing I would say is, I'm really glad you guys came today. We're so glad to have you, man. At our church, we love people, and we're glad you're here. And we have a lot of good things going on here that I think you really enjoy if you get involved in, whatever their age is. So we got, whatever your age, we got classes that meet every Sunday here with kids your age, and you're just learning how to grow and learning about God and learning about important things in life. And if your mother's willing to bring you, we'd just love to have you again plug into those classes, because that's where you can really learn how to live life that's going to be meaningful and enjoyable. And in the summer, we have a camp program, and I'd love for y'all to be able to go to camp next summer. It's a fun time, So just giving them a picture that our church is a place that loves you, and we've got things that you will enjoy doing, and just plant a little seed there, to get them involved. Because again, they're not going to mature overnight by my giving them a little speech. But if I can point them in the direction of some ongoing things, that they can be involved in, then they'll start coming, and they'll tell their mom, "Oh, we want to go, we want to go, we want to go." And the mother, she brought them the first place, so she thinks it's going to help them, so she'll bring them. God bless the single mothers, who are reaching out to churches and taking their children to church, because that's one of the best things you can do, and get them plugged into a group of people that love them.
I love your positive attitude about it too, because sometimes people are like, I don't want that kid here. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
and I think that's changing in our culture. I think people are seeing that it's needed to focus on these families and to help them and to encourage them. But I love how you were just like, hey, we're glad you're here. I think that's a wonderful way to look at it, and that's the way we should be looking at these families. We're so thankful that you're here. Here's some resources we have for you. And because one of the things that we saw, we traveled into our ministry for a couple of years on the road. We did a Hope for Fatherless America national tour for 3 years. And we were in over 200 churches speaking about fatherlessness. And one of the main things that single moms would tell us was, I don't feel connected. I don't feel connected to the church. I don't feel connected to the pastor. Some of them would tell us, I've reached out, and we would just go and speak on fatherlessness. They would come and tell us this. And a lot of times we would try to refer them back to their pastor, because we were just there for a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know how that is. And so we would refer them back to the pastor, because the pastor was their shepherd. But they would say, well, some of them would say, I went to my pastor and there's no help for my kids. And they were just kind of confused on what to do. They were trying to figure out how to be helped. But the thing is, we need as a church to be accessible to these families and not to be scared of them. And I love how you weren't scared of Clarence. Even the question that I asked you weren't scared of that young person that came to your office. I know it was fake, but you weren't scared of that. And I think that's wonderful. And it's a great way of how to handle that. I think most pastors are like that. Most ministry people, they want to help. But I think that a lot of people are just confused on where to start. So any advice on where to start for a pastor, ministry leader? Hey, I've said, doing an analysis, but any other advice on that before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think if a pastor, and I understand if the pastor's the only one on the staff, because there are hundreds of churches all over the country, that he's the only one there. He doesn't have an associate pastor. He doesn't have a youth director. He doesn't have any of those things. And so you can't expect a church, like that to have all the stuff that a larger church would have. Yeah. But I think we start where we are. And I think I'd say, look at your community, see where the needs are that are just right around you, geographically, and then begin to take your leadership, your lay leadership, and discuss, where we are and where we need to go. And are we willing to do this? And can we take a first step? And what might that first step be? Because the lay people have to be involved in it. A pastor can't do it, and the lay people have to be involved in it. He's the leader, yes. But the leader's job is to try to equip, the lay people. First, give them a vision, help them think about what would be the first step. Who's the best person in our church to do that? How might we do that? That kind of thing. And lay people who maybe have just been kind of coming to church, if they can get a vision, that I can invest my life in somebody else that's going to help them forever. They'll come to Christ. Ultimately, we want them to come to Christ and come into the Christian family. But we got to start where they are, with kind of their felt needs. So to me, that would be the way to do that.
That's great. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. As we wrap it up, would you share any more information about your ministry and also how to connect with you and your organization?
Yeah, well, if they go to the website, 5lovelanguages.com, the number 5lovelanguages.com, they'll see all of my books. And they can also see where I'm going to be speaking, doing marriage conferences throughout the year. Moody Publishers sponsors 10 of those all over the country, and they're always posted there. But there's a number of books there that can be used in small group studies and for specific groups in your church. Like even with the love languages, we have love language of children, love language of teenagers, military edition of how it works and how you speak the love languages when they're deployed, how it works with special needs children, how it works in blended families, how it works when you lose a baby at birth, how it helps you and your husband process things. And that's just the love language concepts, but there's a lot of other books on other topics that can be used in study groups in your church. One of them is a book I have on anger. That's the name of the book, is Anger, Taming a Powerful Emotion. And for a group study in your church on a book like that, everybody needs help on handling anger. We all get angry, and that's not a sin. Even God gets angry. Jesus got angry. The anger's not sin. It's just, the Bible says, don't sin when you are angry. Yeah. So learning how to handle anger. But there are other books on those kind of topics, on the second half of marriage and those kind of things that they'll find at that website.
Okay, that's wonderful. And thank you so much. You're on social media too, right? Are you on Twitter and those places?
Well, yeah, they can, at that website, they can sign up for, weekly emails and a lot of other stuff there. But yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Chapman. I appreciate that. And people listening to this, if you're a military family or even anger, that's a great resource. I know a lot of fatherless individuals, they struggle with anger. A lot of fatherless guys, they deal with that. So that's definitely a great resource for single moms that are listening, for even pastors or ministry leaders or volunteers that are working with the fatherless. Definitely check out those resources. Dr. Chapman, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today and to share your experience with fatherlessness and also to share about your ministry. We appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you, Sean. It's good to be with you, and keep up the good work. God bless you.
To learn more about how you can get involved in fatherless family ministry, visit lifefactors.org, where you can find some free resources. You can find our books that we have. You can find even the program that we have to help you start a single mom ministry within your ministry or within your church. We can all work together to lead fatherless families to the Heavenly Father.